Alright, we should be live. Microphone looks good. Alright, we're back. I was having a little bit of trouble. My OBS, the activity feed wasn't loading in from Stream Elements, so trying to figure out what was up with that. But we're back. We are working on Omo, Queen of Vesuva. So at the end of yesterday's stream, I had 72 cards as the count for how many non-land cards we had in the deck, including Omo. And I did a quick count to make sure because I thought I was off by one. As it turns out, I was off by two in our favor, so we only need 10 more cuts before Omo is done. Oops, They just announced a whole bunch of the promos for this year, like associated with Bloomborough and various events coming up, so I was adding them to my list where I keep track of promos. Although, let's be honest, with how Magic's release schedule has been, I have not been able to just grab promos the way I used to, because I can't afford it. God, Magic is, like, absolutely insane right now as far as that's concerned. Like, I don't know how anybody gets into this game other than to just give up on the idea of having most things in most formats, because, like, trying to keep up with standard or modern even with the release schedule is unless you really just don't buy anything except for the cards you absolutely need for the deck that you're playing and just shrug and go, oh well, if you need to play a different deck, all of a sudden, like, your deck stops being meta, and it's just like, well, guess I have to buy an entirely new deck now. And just don't have the stuff on hand. Me, I'm the other way around. I have everything, and that way when stuff spikes in price or suddenly becomes relevant to the meta, I have it. Even though I don't actually actively play Constructed past Commander anymore. I like to be able to. I used to play in every format, now I just want to play Limited, like, all the time. It's the only format I actually genuinely enjoy still, so I get so bored playing the same constructed deck over and over and over again. So that's why I have so many commander decks built and so many more that I can build. Like Omo here. So anyway, she's got 10 cards we need to cut. Let's just go over the list real quick and see if anything jumps out at me first as being a card we no longer need. I am starting to think that maybe it's the 3 creature lords we still have are among them. Those have always been close to being on the chopping block. They're really helpful to have when we have our powerful creatures with the everything counters on them to suddenly go, oh, here's Scion of Una in response to your target removal spell, so you don't actually get to, like, exile Ulamog or kill Omo and shut off all my lands or something. But past that, they're not particularly good. So I am wondering if we just don't need them at all. You know what, I can kind of see that. I could kind of see it before, when we first started discussing them as a possibility be cut, and we already have a deck that utilizes all of them except for the Scion, plus a bunch of other lords anyway. Like a completely alternate build for Omo, so I don't think we actually need to have them in this build. I was trying to see if we needed them just as a way to protect all of our big dumb creatures from our opponent's various removal spells, and while that's cool, I don't think it's essential for this build of the deck, so. And we need cuts, and I don't want to cut, if I don't have to, I don't want to cut any of the Eldrazi Titans, or most or any of the remaining other, like, honorary Titans, like super expensive spells that will just turn the game in our favor. So, the primary reason to run Metamorph is because we can use it to copy things like Thran Dynamo. Horn Power Stone is okay, not the best one to be copying. Gilded Lotus would be great. We cut Dreamstone Hedron for some of the other mana rocks, so that one's not an option anymore. But we want to really be copying something that's making, like, at least 2, preferably 3 mana. Grim Monolith and Manifold are also possibilities, but because the Metamorph costs 3 and 2 life, it's not actually ramping us that turn, and once we use it, we have to spend the mana to untap it again if we don't have Tezzeret in play, so that's a little bit rough. All of that being said, it's probably still going to make the list unless I'm desperate for cuts. Being able to copy our mana rocks in order to get more mana for subsequent turns when our things have such high casting costs is not nothing in a deck like this. Even copying something like Mana Vault or Grim Monolith, just so that way the next turn you untap and instead of having 6 mana, you have 9 or 10 if you hit your land drop, is so important when we have, Ulamog here at 10. Getting from 6 to 10 instead of 6 to 7 next turn kind of makes Ugin happy. All of that. All of these Giant Eldrazi and similar spells. Really appreciate it when we go up 3 mana in a turn. That's true, we also have Cure to untap things like that. She is a permanent, not a land. I want to keep Offer. So Sphinx of Clear Skies is like one of the least on topic creatures we have right now. Like, it doesn't care about creature types, and it's not a giant doomsday weapon or a way to get to a giant doomsday weapon, but it works so well with our commander as a way to get lots of extra cards if it can connect that I'm very inclined to keep it. It is one of the cards, though, that I would consider cutting, if only because it's not on theme with the deck, and it's not helping to get to the themes. It's just a card draw engine that needs to get into play and live long enough to attack and connect. That being said, it is literally a fact or fiction every turn that we can do that, and we do have a few ways to give it haste, so there's a very real chance it will just come down and attack immediately. I think we're okay in that regard to keep it. There's Lure of the Unreal, so we'll get rid of him. Yeah, that's 3 of the cards already off the list, so we just need 7 more. The problem is, I'm not thrilled with our other options for the 7. Alright, so we get rid of those 3. Because the last thing on the list is just Mana Crypt. So get rid of those 3. We go down to 67. But then we have some choices to make. So what do we actually have that can target our stuff with Nadu? Because I know we have a few equipment in the deck, and that's super helpful, especially since one of them is 0 and the other one is 1 to move around, like our 2 haste granting equipment. So that already makes Nadu pretty viable. Do we have anything else we can use to trigger Nadu? There's Greaves. Anything else that targets our creatures? I don't think we have the we don't actually have artifact creatures for Tezzeret to target with his plus, so like, I'm looking at Tezzeret and I'm thinking, if we had artifact creatures, but I don't think any of our colorless things are artifact creatures, so it would have to be like Metamorph specifically, copying something, so that way it would be the artifact creature version of it. Yeah, we're not really going to target our own stuff with any of the big scary Eldrazi triggers, so no. Book Intervention doesn't target. Well, obstructionist targets the ability, not the card. Cura works. Cura will trigger off of it. Nylea's intervention doesn't target on either mode. Not killing my own stuff with Cityscape Leveler, most likely. Conduit, no. Doppelgang targets, but by the time I'm casting Doppelgang, I don't even think that I care. Like, when I'm casting Doppelgang where X equals 3, in order to clone 3 of my Doomsday weapons all at the same time, I'm pretty sure I don't need Nadu's triggers also. Cultivate, Swift Foot Boots, Force of Vigor. Those Scavenging Ooze, Tempt with Discovery, Fractor. Actually, that's true. Some of our lands have activate abilities that target our creatures, although I think I'm cutting. I might leave Rogue's Passage in, but I'm definitely cutting Access Tunnel, so that's not gonna work as often. Like, I'm looking at Manscape Refractor and thinking, I do have lands that can target our creatures, but I don't think I have many, and most, if not all of them, are getting cut anyway. Yeah, I don't think Ripples actually targets. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'd have to double check. Yeah, Sage targets lands. We don't have a ton for Nadu, but the things that we do have are very good at triggering him, so he's just that powerful that I would consider him. But it is possible I could cut Nadu here if I wanted to, since we only have like 3 things that can target him. I did consider building Nadu, but I think a lot of people are considering building Nadu right now because he's kind of insane. So, yeah, I thought I might go with one of the blue-green commanders that immediately struck me as a fun and interesting card, and the everything counter from Omo is just so weird that I wanted to build around it. So here we are. Um, so if I cut the Sphinx, our main card draw engines become the 2 landfall draw cards, and the Kozileks. Like, all 3 Kozileks draw me a bunch of cards. And Nadu. Think we can live without the Sphinx. Sphinx is fine, but we already kept the Sphinx in the other build also, so it's not like we don't have a build where we get to run the Sphinx and take advantage of having instant domain just because our commander's out. Alright, 6 more cards. If we scroll all the way down to our sub lists, our big plays, we still have Kozilek, Ulamog, Karn, Ugin, second Ulamog, second Kozilek, World Breaker, second Emrakul, Cityscape Leveler, Doppelgang, third Emrakul, third Kozilek, third Ulamog. And this was, what, 12, 13? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I don't think I want to cut any more of the payoffs for all this ramping that we're doing. I don't want to cut any more card draw. I think we've cut enough. Our interaction, we have Mana Drain, Force of Will, Owstone Pact, Glenalendra Ulamog, Beast Within, Karn, Cyclonic Rift, Ugin, Ulamog, Worldbreaker, Disallow, Ugin again, Offer You Can't Refuse, Cityscape Leveler, and Force of Vigor. Oh, and Emrakul, Binding, and Guardianship. Do we need Force of Vigor? In addition to having a bunch of cheap counter spells that can interact with the card types that it kills, we also would have access to literally all of the other effects we have can destroy almost any other permanent type. The problem is that they're all expensive and they're big and splashy. They're not like, something we could play in the mid to early game normally without having ramped already. That being said, it does feel like we do have enough things that just destroy a permanent or destroy a non-land permanent that we don't need Force of Vigor also. Yeah, okay. I talked myself into it. I think we have enough haymakers that will destroy our opponent's stuff that we don't need a card that only gets rid of artifacts and enchantments. It still feels weird to cut it, though. So it's possible what I do is I cut Magus of the Candelabra, and then that becomes your substitute Candelabra of Tawnos. Since I don't know that I need both. Like, Candelabra just generates a huge amount of mana with the things that we have. So does Magus, but Magus actually has to either have been in play for a full turn or gain haste. I'm looking for stuff I can cut that's redundant in the deck, and I don't want to cut any of our other artifact mana sources or any of our land fetching spells. Copy land just seems too good. Maybe it's Sage of the Maze. He is one of my few Gates payoffs. Like that and Baldur's Gate are like our two main Gate payoffs. And once he's in play, once he's active, tapping our untapped Gates to untap him effectively lets our Gates tap for 2 mana of any colors. Like 2 mana of any colors, not just the colors that they normally make if I needed them for some reason. Though we did cut Bring to Light, so not so much anymore. So anytime I turn a land into a gate that doesn't already tap for 2+ mana, with him out, it functionally does. And it also has the ability to animate our lands into giant monsters based on our gates. Like, we have so much other so many other ways to ramp in this deck that I don't know that we need the Sage also, but it does pay us off for having turned all of our lands into gates. In addition to how Baldur's Gate pays us off, so that's another way to make our cards relevant when they're all land types. do want copy land. I'm debating if I want Vesuva also. Like, Vesuva's a little worse than well, it's not a little worse. It's in this build. It's worse than Thespian stage, just outright, because we can play the stage early and use it for mana, or turn it into like an Urzatron land or something, so that way we get even more mana out of it for the time. And then once we find the locus, we just change what it's copying. Whereas Vesuva, we have to either wait until we have one of the really good lands to copy, and if it's not specifically Cloud Post, then later on when we find Cloud Post, we're going to be a little bit sad that we didn't have it, but clear this off the list before I forget that I actually did it. Survival of the Fittest definitely stays. Worn Power Stone, Grim Monolith, Thran Dynamo, Gilded Lotus, Lightning Greaves, Oblivion Stone, Sylvan Scrying. Is it Gilded Lotus? Come back down to the mana ramp things. Is it Gilded Lotus? Gilded Lotus makes 3 colored mana once we've cast it, but it's a 5-drop, whereas we have other like mana rocks and ramping spells that can get us that kind of mana or close to it for way less. I do think the ramp is where we have some wiggle room to make cuts without ruining the deck. Alright, so I think I do like cutting the Magus, and if you don't have actual Candelabra and your playgroup doesn't allow for proxies, so the first one is most people, and the other one is a lot of people on top of that, so Magus of the Candelabra is your substitute then for it, to save yourself a literal ton of money. I mean, I guess if you got it in pennies. I don't know how many pennies it takes to be a ton, but pretty sure the close to $1,000, if not $1,000 Candelabra. I honestly don't know how much Candelabra goes for. I forget what it was going for the last time I thought about buying one, because I only have the one. And it's just like, yeah, no, I don't really have that kind of money right this second. And now I never will again, because Magic will not stop releasing set after set with minimum 4 commander decks associated with it, and hey, it's way too much anymore. I'm sorry, I get more and more depressed the more I think about how ridiculous Magic's release schedule has become, and how much money they want for everything. Like, release schedule is ridiculous. The number of supplementary products like commander decks is way up from what it was just a couple years ago. And because the play boosters are more expensive because they're closer to set boosters, but you still get 36 in a box, the price point for sets is way higher, and yeah, it's just a lot to try and maintain my collection. Like, I could never, ever get into this game with the way I collect things, with how it is now. So we cut the Magus. I do think I would be okay cutting Gilded Lotus. I also might be okay cutting Mana Reflection. Like, honestly, most people don't panic. Sorry, there's this little cup full of pens, and one of them has got little jingle bells on it, and it's right next to, like, I'm currently fidgeting with the wire from my headset that's connected to the microphone, and so every once in a while I brush up against it. And I know I've accidentally done it in, like, the past few videos a couple times, so that is what that sound is, and why there's just a random, like, bell ringing every once in a great while. Like, I think Mana Reflection causes more knee-jerk reactions. Like, if you play a Mana Reflection, suddenly you have double mana, and the rest of the table kind of sits up and takes notice. If you play Gilded Lotus, suddenly you have 3 extra mana, and the table is a little concerned about what you might be able to do now. Like, Gilded Lotus on 5 means I have 8 mana now, maybe 9 mana next turn. Mana Reflection on 6 means I have 12, and there's only one thing in our deck that costs 13 mana, so... Also, if you cast Gilded Lotus on 5, like, for 5 mana, you get a 3 mana rebate, so you're still down 2 mana on the turn. If you cast Mana Reflection on 6, there's a very real chance that you can break even on mana or even go up mana for having cast it later in the game. So those are the things that make it scarier for other players and make them kind of knee-jerk reaction kill it. But I don't know if that's a good enough reason to cut it over cutting Gilded Lotus. Alright, so I think we can cut the Magus. So let's go ahead and do that. Because after this, we still have to do the lands for this deck. This one might be a long video as I struggle to make these last 10 cuts, but the last 4 cuts now, we're almost halfway through. We're almost halfway through the time, and we're a little over halfway through the cut, so our ratio is not the worst. 4 more cards we need to get rid of. And I do think we want to actually go down to 60 spells, 40 land for this build. Like, the deck is very, very mana hungry, so I am A-okay with actually getting it to the 60-40 split. Reflection, Glenalendra Archmage, Tezzeret, Expedition Map, Oracle, Palace, Butcher, Infinite, Beast, Karn, Metamorph. Is there anything else we can copy with Metamorph that's particularly good? Like, it can copy all of my artifact mana sources, it can copy a couple of our fancy creatures, but most of them are actually legendary, so... Dynamo, Gilded Lotus... Probably don't need to copy Greaves or Boots. There will be times where I will have 3 large creatures enter the battlefield, or even 2 large creatures, and I haven't found one of the other equipment yet, but that still doesn't seem great. Copying Eternal Witness is pretty good. Top, not really. Like, I can use it to draw a card at that point and reset what it is, but I don't think that's a particularly good use of it. Copying Map seems meh. Can't really copy any of those. They're all legendary. Copying the World Breaker doesn't help. It's a cast trigger. Legendary. Copy Cityscape Leveler. I don't think Conduit's legendary. Doesn't really come up. Of Worlds. Yeah, it's just a regular artifact. Okay. The problem is copying it doesn't really do anything because I can't cast the thing that I choose from the graveyard if I've cast something this turn. So having a second conduit, like, it doesn't give me extra land drops. I can't play 2 lands from the graveyard with it. Didn't I remove Force of Vigor? Did I never actually cut it off of the main list? Is that what just happened? Yep, okay. Fixed it. Fixed it, everybody. Emrakul, Kozilek, Nadu, Ulamog, all of those are uncopyable. AC. Scavenging Ooze doesn't do much unless I'm worried about targeted removal. And then Reanimator spells. So Sage of the Maze is one of the best creatures I have to copy. So it's like Eternal Witness, Sage of the Maze, and Cityscape Leveler are the creatures. So aside from copying one of my pre-existing mana rocks, or one of my opponent's creatures or artifacts, Metamorph is doing nothing in our deck. I think that's the worst Metamorph has done in any deck where I've considered it. Is being mostly a 3-mana copy of my best mana rock. Alright. Fine, we can cut Metamorph. 63. 3 more cuts. Just 3 more. Soul Ring, Candelabra, Power Stone, Grim Monolith, Thran Dynamo. It might legitimately be Gilded Lotus. The deck doesn't need a ton of colored mana to function, so the Gilded Lotus actually tapping for 3 mana of 1 color is not as important. I do have to make sure we have enough basic lands, though, that we can actually function under like a Blood Moon or something, because a lot of my non-basic lands are already pretty difficult to make function properly. Although with the everything counter on it, they would gain back the, like, I would have to put the counter on afterwards, I believe. I think the layering, I'm not 100% sure. Layering is one of the more what's the word I'm looking for? Not arcane, but that's close. What is the word I'm looking for? Shoot. Alright, let's find Gilded Lotus while I'm trying to think. Abstruse, maybe? That's definitely also in the right ballpark. It is one of the most complicated rules that I don't fully comprehend in Magic. It is one of those ones that I see rulings on it, and it's just like, I don't know how that works. Like, Urborg and Blood Moon is one of the most bizarre card interactions I have ever seen. It's like, if my Urborg is a mountain, how are all of my other lands swamps? And the answer is layers. Because at some point in time, things are going to both be and not be something at the same time, and Magic can't handle Schrodinger's rulings, so it has to have an actual definition for how the cards interact with each other. And sometimes it's timestamp order, and sometimes it's just layers, and when it's layers, that's where I start to get confused, because I don't fully understand the layer system. Like, one day I really need to actually sit down and read over that until I comprehend it. And can, that way I can actually figure out the rulings on my own. Like, once I can look at the set of cards and be able to say it works this way because of this and be correct. That's what I want to do, because a lot of times I have seen, not judge tests. I've never actually taken the judge test, but I've seen websites that do magic rulings where they'll have like a trivia, like, can you figure out what the magic ruling is before we explain it to you, kind of situation. And while I will get a lot of them right, sometimes like the when they do multiple choice, I will choose the one that is yes the right answer for what the actual interaction is, but they will have the reasons why it's the answer, and they'll be different on multiple ones, and I won't know what the correct one is for why it's the answer. And if you don't know why the rule is the way it is, then you can't use your knowledge in other situations, basically. Wow. I am really stumbling on words today. Like, there is a word for, like, very similar to skill transference, where you can have the rule memorized by rote and not understand why it works the way it does, and that means that when you encounter the rule in a different situation, you won't be able to know what the answer is because you don't know that specific situation, and you only knew the other situation because you memorized the answer rather than understanding the mechanics of the game and why that was the answer. So, in order to actually be able to do things in Magic without having to consult judges and the rules all of the time, you kind of need to have an understanding of why the ruling is the way it is, not just that it's the way it is. And so I like to understand why the ruling is the way it is, and layers are one of those things that I do not understand. So I can know what the answer is, but I can't then apply it to other situations because I don't know what the layers are in any given situation. So I don't know which one is the one that we have to abide by, or which one, like, how they interact together. Because it does matter which layer each thing is on. That is one of the things I understand about layers, because once you hit a certain layer, other things from the other layers can't affect you anymore, even if they're trying to, and even if they say they do on the card. Which is why Urborg and Blood Moon interact in such a way that all of your lands are still swamps, because Urborg's layer is at a different strata than Blood Moon's lair, so it's on the strata where Blood Moon can't actually take away its ability to turn things into swamps anymore, because that's how layers work. Once you get to a certain layer, the things from the other layers in one direction can't affect you anymore, and you can only be affected by the ones from the layers in the other direction. And I forget if it's upper or lower at that point, too, for how they organize it, so... Like, if it's like Urborg is at the lower layer and so it's beneath Blood Moon and can't be affected by it, or if it's on the upper layer and therefore above Blood Moon and above its effect. But that is how it works. Like, once you hit a certain layer, other layers in one direction can't affect you anymore because you have to have precedence over them or the game breaks down. And you actually get into situations where you have humility and two opalescences in play, and everything just, like, the game state becomes a permanent state of flux if there's no layering rules in order to explain how all of your enchantments are now 1/1s with no abilities, even though the reason that they're 1/1s or creatures at all is because there's an enchantment in play that currently has no game text, so how is it a creature? Well, at some point in time, the layer just can't take away the ability anymore. Like, either they have to all be creatures with no abilities, or they have to be enchantments. And since them being enchantments means they have their abilities, then they have to become creatures. So the creatures just can't have their abilities, but they are still creatures, because there needs to be an answer to this question. Is what we get down to. Okay. enough rambling about layers and whatnot. We have two more cuts with Gilded Lotus and Phyrexian Metamorph gone. We did actually cut them off the list, right? Because that's me looking for Gilded Lotus. Yep. And Phyrexian Metamorph. Yep. Okay. Alright, so two more cards off the list. Will be good. Kodama's Reach, Sensei's Divining Top, Pact of Negation, Mana Reflection, Lenalendra Archmage, Tezzeret, Expedition Map. What are we going to cut from this list? We need two more cards to go. It might be Smaller Ugin. Smaller Ugin was one of the ones I brought up cutting the other day because it can only kill. Smaller Ugin, what do you actually kill? Is he permanence with one or more colors, or destroy target permanent that's one or more colors? Okay, so yeah, I'm less inclined to get rid of him then if he straight up kills any permanent that's one or more colors. We do run into a tiny bit of a problem where most of my stuff kills colorless stuff, so I do have to worry a tiny bit about other Eldrazi and colorless artifacts and that sort of thing. Maybe it is Nadu because I don't have enough stuff that targets him. We went over the list and we came up with like 6 things that can target for Nadu. And some of them aren't repeatable over the turn either. Like, the equipment is the best thing because we can, especially Greaves, because we can just move Greaves around the entire table and trigger as many times as we have creatures twice. So, Greaves and Nadu is like the perfect combination. Boots lets us do that for 1 mana per trigger until we run out of mana. But then the other things like Kiora is once per turn. Don't really want to blow up my own things with any of our stuff, so like, that seems really bad, even if it is getting us a card out of it. The sad thing is that even with all of that, Nadu is still kind of silly. In that if we ever get any of that going, he's just going to draw us a ton of cards, / put a ton of lands into play. And also all of our opponents' targeted stuff, like Nadu has to die first, and he might not be the biggest problem, given our deck especially. Like, yeah, I'm going to give you the top card of your deck because I really can't get hit by Ulamog again. And I'd like to kill Nadu, but 3/4 flyer is not really the issue right now. AC, Scavenger Ooze, Tempt with Discovery, Fierce Guardianship, Manascape Refractor. Land, Sage of the Maze. It might be copy land, like, it might be that copy land should just be Vesuva, and we just get rid of copy land because it's taking up a deck slot to be another way to copy. Cloud Post. I can see that argument. Alright, so we take that one off, and that leaves us one more card. Just one more. What is the worst card still on this list? the card that is not pulling its weight? Hmm. Is it doppelgang? Most of my stuff is like this was the problem with the Phyrexian Metamorph is that a lot of my stuff is legendary, so copying it does not actually help me. And copying our opponent's stuff is fine, but it's not like I can copy our Planeswalkers and have multiple Karns in play or Ugins or something. And I can't copy most of our Doomsday weapons because they're all legendary creatures. So the main thing about Doppelgang is basically that it can copy a lot of my makes more than one mana sources. And if I'm doing that for X equals 2, then that's 8 mana already. So I think I would just rather have the other mana ramp thing. So as powerful as Doppelgang is objectively, this might not be the like we can make so much mana that we can probably cast Doppelgang and copy our opponent's stuff, and in the right circumstances assemble their combos better than they did. Where it goes from this is going to kill you over the next 3 turns to no, I have it all right now, and the mana to use it too, given how my deck works. But yeah, I can see it being Doppelgang because of that, because we can't copy our stuff effectively. Alright, I think that's the deck then. We could go back and forth a little bit on some of the other cards on the list and make arguments for cutting them instead, but I think this is the deck. I'm willing to call that there, and now we just need to figure out the lands. So it says I only have room for 9 basics right now. I kind of want to add in Vesuva, but I think there's some other ones we can cut, so let's see. Don't need Cloud Post. Or, I'm sorry, don't need Cloud Post. Not cutting Cloud Post. Don't need Cloud Post. That might have been the biggest Freudian slip ever. Looking for what I don't need, and I saw Cloud Post. So, Rogue's Passage, maybe. We definitely don't need the other one, though. So, do I bother with Maze's End? We have so many cool ways of winning, I don't think we actually need Maze's End. I think it's interesting to have it as a backup win con in the deck, but I don't want to be in a position where it's just correct to Maze's End for the win when I'm doing all the cool stuff instead. So, yeah, I think we lose Maze's End. We definitely lose Access Tunnel. Maze. Maybe we lose Waterlogged Grove. I don't think we actually need the Labyrinth. Like, Labyrinth is just 2 mana if we've imprinted a card on it, so we have to have the card to imprint at the time. We definitely want Urza's Cave, though. That one is super on topic here. We have the gates, the command tower, nesting ground can go. We definitely want Workshop, because we'll be able to turn everything into Urza lands. So, do we need Waterlogged Grove? I think this is the last one we can justify cutting. Make more room. Because right now we have 27 land and I'm about to make it 28. So that leaves room for 12 basic lands. 12 basic lands is probably fine, actually. Yeah, we're cutting Ugin's Labyrinth for the same reason we're not running Eldrazi Temple, Eye of Ugin, Ancient Tomb, Temple of the False Gods. Like, we don't actually need any of those, so once we get going, we have plenty of mana. There is an argument to be made for even cutting the other two pieces of the Urzatron, because we really only need Tower, but these being extra sources of mana is fine, and they have no drawbacks in our deck other than our commander needs to be in play, whereas all the other taps for 2 mana cards need some kind of setup or have restrictions on them. I could even see running Cavern of Souls just to name Eldrazi, since they are our primary Doomsday weapons. Alright, so I think we go to Time Spiral and we add in Vesuva. I mean, she's the queen of it. We should add it into our deck. We add in Vesuva. Cavern of Souls was Avacyn restored, right? Originally. Yeah. You know what? I think that's actually fine. That way all of our Eldrazi will be immune to counter spells. So that way when we tap 15 mana, our opponent has to Summary Dismissal or whatnot. I think Summary Dismissal still works on them, right? Because it exiles the spells and counters all abilities, not the other way around. Yeah, exile all their spells and counter all of their abilities, so that would still work on them. Alright, so we double check land. 9 land. We have 29, so we have room for 11 land. We have 1 mono green land in Boseiju, so pretty sure we go oh wow, numbers just gone completely out of my head. We have 29, so we have room for 11. So Island 6, Forest 5. Okay. So there's our 11 additional lands. And that'll do it. So there we have it. Omo, Queen of Vesuva, Lands Matter build. Take advantage of our Locus and our Urzatron and our Baldur's Gate. Alright, so yeah, I think that's the deck. If you really, really want to win with Maze's End, go ahead, pull out one of the... probably one of the islands, I guess, because the forest can actually get us our other colors more readily. Like, the islands are not going to be good for tutoring up our land to begin with, which might even be a reason to go a little bit heavier on forest, but I think we're fine here. We have enough dual lands, so... But yeah, that's going to do it for this build of Omo. I don't know what we're going to be working on next. I haven't decided. We're getting a bunch of Bloomburrow spoilers at the moment, so I might pick one of them. I might do an Assassin's Creed deck build. I'm not thrilled with Universes Beyond, but that doesn't mean I can't appreciate the game text of the cards, at least, as far as that goes. For the same reason that I've managed to build, you know, Doctor Who decks and, like, commander decks based around Doctor Who commanders and Fallout commanders and have fun with them anyway, even though I really don't care for Universes Beyond as a concept. We can do the same with Assassin's Creed. Yeah, I'll figure out what I'm building next time, but for right now, that's going to do it for me, so thank you for watching, and I will see you then. Have a good rest of your day.